This teacher had something strange about his eyes. His left eye was naturally crossed, so when he looked at people, his gaze never quite focused. Even stranger, he always carried a faint fishy smell on him year-round. The students and other teachers secretly gave him a nickname behind his back.
That poor wall-eyed bastard.
But what really made them dislike him went far beyond his looks and his odor. In his classroom, there were no shortcuts, rich or poor. Everyone was treated exactly the same. When the final exam results came out that day, the classroom was filled with groans. Most students got either a C or a D, and some even got an F. Only one student, Angus, managed a B+. This naturally upset some of the wealthier kids, and Paul was soon called into the principal's office. The principal got straight to the point. A senator's son had failed his class. The problem was, that senator was a big donor to the school. He just funded a new gymnasium. The principal hoped Paul could cut the kid some slack and give him a passing grade, even a C- would do. But Paul still refused to compromise. The principal's face turned grim, but on principle, he couldn't find any fault with Paul's stance, so he redirected his anger elsewhere. He assigned Paul the unpleasant task of staying on campus over the holiday to supervise the students. His reasoning was simple. Since Paul had no family anyway, staying at school would also earn him a bonus. Faced with this unreasonable arrangement, Paul chose to accept it in silence. He had taught at this school his entire life. The current principal had also been his student. He had never married, had no children, and lived in the faculty dormitory year-round. The school was his whole world. When the holiday bell rang, everyone got on the buses to go home. But Angus never saw his mother show up. Instead, he got a cold phone call. His mother wanted to take this rare holiday to go on a belated honeymoon with her new husband, and she hoped her son would understand. And so, Angus was also stuck at school. A total of 7 people stayed behind. 5 students, 1 teacher, and 1 cook. The cook, Mary, had lost her son in the Vietnam War not long ago. This was her first Christmas holiday without him, because her son had been at this school before. In order to be as close as possible to her son, so she stayed as well. But the very first day of the break was anything but peaceful. A few students soon got into a scuffle over a trivial matter. Paul stepped in just in time to stop things from escalating. When mealtime came this eve, a loud roar shattered the quiet of the campus. It was the long-haired boy's father, coming to pick up his son in his private plane. In the end, the father had softened. He couldn't bear to leave his son alone at school for New Year's. He even invited all the remaining students to spend the holiday at his family's ski resort in the mountains. Paul immediately called the principal and the children's parents to confirm. After getting their approval, everyone happily packed their bags and got ready to board the plane. Everyone except Angus, because his mother's phone just kept going to voicemail. Watching the helicopter carrying his classmates slowly rise into the sky, Angus was heartbroken. Now, only 3 people were left in the vast campus: a harsh teacher, a rebellious student, and a heartbroken mother. They made up this year's Christmas stay-behind list, but Angus didn't want to spend a single second there anymore. He started calling nearby hotels. He wanted to escape this school, even if just for one night. Paul stopped him in time. For safety reasons, Angus had to stay on campus. But the stricter Paul was, the more rebellious Angus became. He even took off running, with Paul chasing after him. A game of cat and mouse unfolded across the campus. Angus ran all the way to the gymnasium, which was strictly off limits to students. Paul warned him from behind, quoting an ancient. 2 of them rushed to the town hospital. Paul, usually so composed, was visibly flustered for once. After leaving the hospital, Paul took him to a restaurant in town. Coincidentally, the part-time waitress there was none other than the school's secretary. The secretary was very warm toward Paul, and even invited them to her Christmas Eve party. Angus could tell there was chemistry between the teacher and Paul, but Paul seemed nervous and self-conscious, denying it repeatedly. On the drive back to school, the atmosphere between the two was a little different. A fishy smell wafted over, and Angus finally couldn't hold back his curiosity. He asked Paul if that was why he was afraid to get close to women. Paul was silent for a moment, then confessed his secret. He had a rare genetic disorder. His body couldn't prop these. On Christmas Eve, after Angus's persuasion and Mary's agreement, the 3 of them finally decided to go to the secretary's party. Paul even dressed up for the occasion. He sprayed half a bottle of air freshener on himself, hoping to mask the smell. The party was crowded. Angus's attention was soon drawn to the secretary's niece. The girl gave Angus a tour of the house, and the 2 young people grew closer in the warm atmosphere. Paul also seemed to be having his moment. He and the secretary hit it off, and discovered they had a lot in common. Mary, meanwhile, sat alone listening to records. The school's janitor had also come to the party. He had specially prepared an elegant brooch for Mary as a Christmas gift. It seemed like it would be a Christmas Eve where all 3 of them could find happiness. But the warmer the atmosphere, the sharper the sting of sorrow. Just when Paul thought things might develop further, the secretary's partner appeared. But before Paul could even process his disappointment, Angus called him into the kitchen. The janitor's caring gesture and that delicate brooch had become the last straw for Mary. Her son had just died. She felt she didn't deserve anything good. The 3 of them slunk out of the party early, feeling thoroughly defeated. Early the next morning, Paul drove to a nearby lot and bought a Christmas tree, and also prepared gifts for the 2 of them. There was no lavish feast this Christmas, no family by their side, but these 3 lonely people shared each other's warmth in that moment. Paul surprisingly announced that to make this a Merry Christmas for them, he would try his best to accommodate their wishes. Angus said he wanted to go ice skating in Boston and wanted to see a real Christmas tree. According to the rules, students staying over the holiday weren't allowed to leave campus. But this time, Paul relented. He decided to take Angus to Boston under the pretext of an outdoor field trip. Mary said she wanted to visit her pregnant sister, and so, the three of them set off. Paul drove and dropped Mary off at her sister's place first, then they made it to Boston. Angus finally got his wish. He skated freely in the city center square, with Paul standing on the sidelines, his gaze following the spirited boy, a fatherly smile unconsciously spreading across his face. That evening, on their way back to the hotel, Paul ran into an old classmate who was now a tenured professor at Harvard. When asked about his work, the usually honest Paul told a rare lie, vaguely saying he was collaborating with prestigious overseas universities. Angus played along as Paul's nephew, and the two worked together smoothly to brush the man off.
Paul, I'm just so glad you landed on your feet.
The encounter piqued Angus's interest in Paul's past. Under his persistent questioning, Paul finally revealed a secret he'd kept buried for 30 years. He had once been a promising student at Harvard, but upon graduation, his thesis was plagiarized by a wealthy, well-connected roommate, who then falsely accused Paul in return. Because the roommate came from a powerful family, Paul, with no connections of his own, became the victim of this injustice, and was expelled from Harvard. But the direct reason for his expulsion wasn't the principal. The old principal had trusted Paul's character, and had given him the chance to teach at Barton Academy. Though it was only a poorly paid adjunct position, being able to continue teaching the history he loved was already enough for Paul. The reason he'd lied to his old classmate was because he knew that if he told the truth, that classmate would just treat his story as a loser's joke and spread it around. He didn't want to give that kind of person the chance to define his life. That night, two lonely souls grew even closer because of yet another shared secret. But this newfound closeness was put to the test the very next day. Paul took him to see a historical film, but Angus used the excuse of going to the bathroom to sneak out. Paul was deeply disappointed. He rushed out of the theater and caught up with Angus just in time. Under Paul's questioning, Angus finally revealed the real purpose of his trip. He wanted to go see his father. The car drove to a psychiatric hospital in Boston. Angus's father had severe schizophrenia and had been living there for a long time. Angus walked into the visiting room alone. He cheerfully told his father about all sorts of things at school, saying his grades were pretty good, hoping to get a word of praise from him.
I have to tell you something. I think they're putting something in my food.
All his expectations shattered in that moment. His father's condition hadn't improved. It had only gotten worse. After his father was hospitalized, his mother had divorced him quickly and immediately started a new life. To get rid of Angus, who she saw as a burden, she had stuffed him into one boarding school after another, and Angus was terrified of inheriting his father's illness, terrified of being abandoned forever. So he constantly used aggressive words to test the world, to hurt others, and to hurt himself. Looking at this fragile boy in front of him, Paul seemed to see his younger self.
You're your own man. You're just a kid. And you're smart. You've got time to turn things around.
Teachers can't help but lecture, but this time, Angus took every word Paul said to heart, and this was the deepest lesson that Paul, as a history teacher, could ever give. After meeting up with Mary, this brief field trip officially came to an end. They returned to school. The three of them, along with the kind janitor, gathered in the staff lounge for the New Year's countdown. There was no grand party, no spectacular fireworks, but this makeshift stay-behind alliance was exceptionally warm. When the holiday ended, Barton Academy buzzed with its usual energy again. All the students had had a great break, but after just one class, Paul was called to the principal's office. Inside sat Angus's mother and stepfather. It turned out that the Christmas gift Angus had secretly sent his father had been discovered by an orderly, and the visit to the psychiatric hospital was exposed. His mother, who had been desperate to get rid of him anyway, had come to the school with her new husband, ready to transfer Angus to a military academy where he'd be kept in line. Now they were just waiting for Paul to admit Angus's wrongdoing. Everyone's eyes were on him. If Paul told the truth, he could keep his job and go back to his quiet life. But for Angus's future, he made a decision that would change all their fates.
It was my idea. He didn't trick me or slip the leash. I took him to see his father.
Paul took full responsibility unto himself. That meant he had openly violated school rules and would be fired, but Angus was protected. Paul hadn't decided where to go next, but he'd always wanted to write a book about history since his college days. Maybe now was his chance to make that dream come true. As for Mary herself, she started saving money again. This time, it was for her sister's soon-to-be-born child. Her sister had told her that if it was a boy, his middle name would be the name of Mary's late son. Mary's life finally had a new hope and purpose. At the school gate, Paul loaded all his belongings into the car. Angus wanted to skip class to see him off, but Paul wouldn't allow it.
Keep your head up, all right? You can do this.
I was going to tell you the same thing.
From the passenger seat, Paul picked up the bottle of brandy he'd taken from the principal's office, took a long, hard swig, and spat it out onto the land that had held him captive for 30 years. Then, he raised his head and drove off into the biting wind. The ending wasn't perfect. Paul lost his job. Angus returned to his cold, indifferent family. Mary's life remained full of hardship. But what had changed was that they had all stepped out of the past that had confined them. When Paul left Barton Academy, he was no longer the failure defined by the system. He had become the author of his own life, and had gained true freedom. Angus was a troubled teenager starving for love. His rebellion was just a shield. Paul gave him the courage to break free from the chains of fate. Though he returned to his old life, he now had a sense of direction. And Mary, who had endured the loss of her son, began saving money for her sister's child. She walked out of her endless grief, and transformed her love for her son into hope for the future. What truly defines us is not the experiences we've been through, but the person we choose to become after walking through them.